I've grown. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just do that? If you could just press a button and you were a foot taller and about, you know, a stone and a half thinner. That would be really cool. The reason that I look taller is because I have to work with my laptop completely flat so that the overhead camera can get a shot. So if you're thinking why she's suddenly taller, that's why. Right, let's look at the Canvas Workspace files. And I'm going to talk you through exactly what the Scan and Cut sees, what we need it to see, how we make it see it, and then how we create our panels. So if I go into Retrieve Data and into the USB and into the Canvas Workspace files this time. So you've got your bespoke patterns, which are the ones that are at the back of your booklet. So they're the panels that the team have designed that you can use as a stencil, you can punch patterns into, you can take that pattern and punch it into a different shape. You can use your stencils USB files with this, you can use your boxes patterns with this, you can use these patterns with your boxes, etc, etc. So it's ongoing. It's you know, it's something that's running through Cutting Craftorium now, and it's, you can mix and match, which is fabulous, because the more you can use those files, the better value that USB becomes. So the first thing we're going to do is deal with the pattern blanks, and there's only one set, and they're the same for all the circle doilies, then the ovals, then the rectangles, then the squares. So these are consistent right the way throughout all of the circle doilies, etc, etc. So when we set this on the mat, what the Scan and Cut sees is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles sat on top of each other. These are all separate to us. So when we move this and we move this, we've then got one solid circle, which is your smallest. Then you've got a circle frame, which is a medium one, and then you've got a large circle frame. The Scan and Cut doesn't see it like that. It sees one solid circle there. It sees 2 circles on top of each other there, and 2 circles on top of each other there. So we need to make it see it the way that we see it as a frame. So the way we do that is we save them into Canvas Workspace. Okay, so I'm going to save into the cloud, and then I can recall it in Canvas Workspace. If you have a machine that is not Wi-Fi enabled, you will plug the USB into here, and you'll go into, if we go onto my computer screen at the top now, there is a little button that says SVG. You'll click on that, you'll choose the file off your USB and import it in. So it can be done on every single machine. You don't have to have a Wi-Fi enabled machine to do this. You just need to take the USB out and plug it in. So if I go now, so in my projects now, because that's where it saves it all, those frames don't exist until I refresh it. And once I refresh it, those circles will then appear in a box like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is align them all, because I tried to divide them this way and it confused me, but I want to show you so you can make your own decision. So all those are selected at the moment, so I'm going to go to Edit and just put them back to the place that they were before we separated them on the Scan and Cut. So align centrally vertically, and go to Edit and align in the middle or centrally horizontally. Now if I divide this, and what divide means is that you're punching one circle through another to create a frame. It's called a compound path, and I know that sounds really technical, but a compound path is when the machine or Canvas or the machine sees it the way that we see it. So a lacy panel rather than a square with all the little pieces sat on top. A circle frame rather than one circle sat on the other. And divide takes it and makes it into a compound path. If we did that bit for you, you can't then ungroup those patterns and start to play with them and pull bits out and make your own patterns. So I insist that our designers save them as a non-compound path, and then we make them a compound path in Canvas, because it's one click of a button and it gives you so much more versatility. So that's why, if you're sitting there thinking, well, why don't you just do that for us? I could, we could, however, it wouldn't give you as much scope with all your patterns, Right, so if I divide all my circles with them laid on top, I'm going to show you what it makes. So with everything still selected, I go to Edit, and down in Process Overlap, the second one in from the left is Divide. And when you hover over it on a PC, it comes up with the name of that file. This is why I would encourage you to learn Canvas on a PC or a laptop, because it hovers over and it shows you what it means. On a tablet, it doesn't. On your phone, it doesn't. So make sure that if you're learning the web app version, try and learn it on a PC, because it just helps you. Or you can write out a little list of what button is what. So when I divide now, it's sending down that big punch in my head, and it's punching all those circles through themselves. So what you end up with is that, which is fine, but then you end up with that, and then you end up with that, and then you end up with that and that. Now I have no idea now which one I want to put the pattern into. So that completely threw me off, because I was like, I don't know which bit's which now. So the way that I do it, let's get rid of all that and put that in the bin. And I'm going to go back to my scan and cut screen. So I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to put these back to where they were. So I can use my undo button like that, and this is how the file comes up in the first place. So I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to save it into the cloud again. So I'm just doing it from scratch. I could do it now with these, but I'll just show you sending it in directly. So now when I go in and do my projects, it'll bring it up as the file is on the USB. So what I do, and this I found much easier, is separate them now. So that's my largest frame, that's my middle frame, and that's the circle for the smallest panel. So I don't need to divide this one because it's just one circle. If I now click on that and go to Edit and divide that, it's going to leave me with the frame, and I can then eliminate that circle, and that saves any confusion. Now you might not get confused by it. Brilliant. I did, so I'm showing you this way. Then go to Edit and divide that, and then grab that, move it out of the way, and get rid of that circle. So now the scan and cut sees that the way that we see it. It sees frames. So one solid circle for the smallest bit, and then two frames that go around that. So now it sees it as frames. Simple as that. So the next thing that I'm going to do is go to Edit and select all, and then align them back to where they were. So align it centrally vertically, and back to Edit, and centrally horizontally, and then that are the bits that I'm going to punch into my chosen panel, okay, like that. So now what we need to do is select a panel and send that in. Okay, so let's go back to our scan and cut screen. So I'm going to press OK and Home and get rid of that. Then I'm going to go to Retrieve Data, USB, and into the Canvas Workspace files, and into the bespoke patterns. And this is where you have the 40 panel patterns, okay, or patterned panels. Floral, geometric, lace and romantic, and they relate, if I bring the booklet back in, to these designs that are the back of your booklet. So you've got 10 floral, 10 geometric, 10 bespoke patterns, and 10 romantic bespoke patterns. Okay, so I'm going to choose, let's have a look, lace 1, this one up here, okay, because I quite like the look of that. I like all of them, but that one is particularly beautiful. So I go into lace, do it with this one, I'm not leaning across. And because you can't see the numbers, they are literally in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay? So I'm going to choose number 1. And it's going to open up that pattern. Now it might be a little bit slower opening up on a CM machine, especially a CM 300 or 600, because it has to count the paths to make sure it can open. We know they open because we test them on one of those machines. So it might take a little while, so just don't cancel it, just be patient with it. It's just counting to see if it can open it. It doesn't automatically know, it has to read the amount of paths. So then what I'm going to do is save that into the cloud. Again, if you're working on a CM machine that isn't Wi-Fi, plug your USB in and import it in. So now remember, what we need to do is refresh our projects to find that file. And I'm going to bring that on, I'm going to click on that, and it's going to come up on my mat. At this point, it is grouped and you can ungroup it. That's because it's a non-compound path at the moment. That's why I get them to save them like that. So you can ungroup it and then you can play around with the shapes that are within that pattern. But we're not going to ungroup it because we're all right with it grouped. So we're just going to select it, and now we're going to do exactly what we did with the circles. We're going to divide it. So what this is seeing now, what the machine sees now on canvas, is a square with all these little shapes that make up that pattern sat on top of it. We need to punch it through, and then that creates a non-compound path. So it then sees it the way that we see it, which is a lacy panel. Okay. Once you work out how the Scan and Cut sees things, it's brilliant, because then you know how its mind works and you can make it do what you want it to do. So with that selected, I'm going to go to Edit and I'm going to go down to Divide. Now again, this is going to take a while. So you'll see that blue bar go across the top. It's scrolling through. It could take up to a minute. And what's really interesting with this is it's thinking about it, it's deciding what it needs to punch, it's making sure that there's no open paths, so no lines that aren't complete. It's making sure that there's no stray paths, as it calls, so an extra line that a designer might have left in it. And it's checking all that to see if it can punch it, because it can't punch a line through a shape, it needs to punch a shape through a shape. So if any one of those shapes isn't closed, it doesn't see it as a complete shape, it sees it as a line, and a partial line, so it can't punch it through. Okay, so that's that extra little bit of information. So if you've got anything that's got detail lines in, you would need to remove the detail lines first before you divide it, because it won't let you do that. So we've now got what looks like we had before, but if I grab the outside edge, so I hover over it, left click, and drag that out of the way. This is all the waste bit that the punch has left behind, okay? So we then left click and we can get rid of all that. And we drag that down. Now if that had been saved as a compound path, we wouldn't be able to do this bit, and then we wouldn't be able to use these panels for other things. So it's just that next step of creativity, which is fabulous. So I've now got a lacy panel. That's how we see it, that's how the machine will see it, that's how Canvas Workspace sees it. We've also then got all our circles, our circle frames, and our one solid. That's how we see it, that's now how Canvas sees it. So if we drag a box around these circles now, and we go to Edit, and we group them so we can move them as one, I'm going to move this over here. And I like to do all three at once, because if you're punching all three panels at once and then you take those and you put them on top of your doily, the pattern is going to flow right the way through. If you do the smallest one in one corner and the middle one in another corner and the big one at the top, it won't look like a cohesive pattern. It will split it. And if that's what you want, if you want more of a random look, brilliant, that's how you do it. But I want that pattern to flow right through the pattern bits that are being cut into my doily. So I do it this way, so I align it all. So what we're going to do now is select, go to Edit and select all, because we want to select the pattern panel and the circles. And I'm going to make sure that they're central. So I'm going to go to Edit and align it centrally vertically, and then Edit and align it centrally horizontally. Now the key thing now is that you click off it and you select just the circles. Any shape that you want to put this pattern into must be behind the pattern. So it can send the pattern punch down and punch it into the shape. It doesn't work if the shapes are on top, okay? It does a different thing. So to do that, I've got my circles selected. I'm going to go to Edit and I'm going to go to Order and I'm going to send the circles to the back. It doesn't look like anything's changed at all on your screen, but it has. It's sent it back a layer. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Edit and Select All, and Edit and Remove Overlap. So everything that is overlapping is going to disappear. So if I click on that, again, it's going to send that bar across. It needs to think about it, so let it do its thing. That's pretty quick, actually, which is good. And then it doesn't look like much has changed. But when you then click the original pattern and move that out of the way, it's punched that pattern into those circle frames, okay? Which is super cool. Hasn't made any difference to the original pattern, so you can still use that as a whole, but it's taken the pattern within those circle frames and it's punched it into it, which is super exciting. So let's do the next bit now. So I don't need that anymore, so I can put that in the bin. And then I'm going to, now these are 3 separate panels. So I've got one, bear with, while it catches up, one. I've got the small one, the medium one, and the large one. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is download those and recall them on my machine. If you're working on a non-Wi-Fi enabled machine, you would have a blank USB in your computer at the same time, and you would download that, and if you're working on Windows 10, it downloads it to your downloads folder. If you're working on anything before that, I think it gives you an option to save as, and you can save it to your USB. But that now has put that pattern in those panels, which is fabulous. So let me download that. Oh, bear with, don't want to do that. Let's undo it. It needs a little time to catch up, bear with. Undo like that, put it back to where it was, and then we download it. So you still have 3 separate shapes, so 3 round pattern pieces, just like you do with the pattern panels that are on the USB now, but you've made your own pattern panel. So I'm going to scan and cut transfer like that, and it's ready. So now when I go back to my scan and cut and I press OK and home, I go to retrieve data, and this time instead of going to the USB, I go to the cloud. And there are my shapes. So there are 3 individuals, so you can still do what we did before. You can still take one and just use 1 or 2 or 3 or all those different combinations that we talked about earlier on. But you can also now add in your decorative edges. So this is where it all links back. So we now add, and we go to retrieve data and the USB. We go into our doilies and we go into our circle, and I'm going to stick with circle 6 even though it's a different patterned panel, and I'm going to bring on my decorative edges because we're going to use the decorative edges to cut this detail out. Okay, so I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to edit, multiple select everything on the mat and press OK, and then I'm going to align them just to show you that all those decorative edges fit perfectly in between each one of those patterned panels. So if I zoom right in, you can see you've got your decorative edge, then your pattern panel. Let me find my stylus. Where have I put my stylus? Oh, I'll use my finger, it's quicker. Look, scroll down. I've then got another decorative edge there with a small one, and another decorative edge there with the medium one. So it slots in between, okay? So if you cut all that out, it would cut you the detail with the outside and the inside decorative edge on the large. It would use the middle decorative edge and the smallest one to cut out the middle panel, and then your little circle in the middle. But you can do it differently to that as well. So if you just wanted the large outside edge and the large pattern, you would then align those two and it would cut it out and the center would stay solid. Or you could have the middle one with the middle, and you could have the small one with the small. So each one of those has a decorative edge. If I zoom in, and I haven't aligned them, remember, so you've got your decorative edge and your medium, your decorative edge and your small, and your decorative edge and your large. And you would align all those, cut them out, and they would give you 3 solid layers with that detail cut in. If you want to cut it out, so let's come out of zoom and let's take the middle decorative one and put it in there. So we then multiple select part of the mat, and we press OK, just like we did before, and we align it centrally vertically, centrally horizontally. That will now cut as a frame. So that middle decorative edge will cut it out, and the outside decorative edge will cut out, and the pattern will stay in the frame. So that's when the versatility really comes into its own. So that's how you take those panels from the Canvas Workspace files and the pattern panel from the Canvas Workspace files, and you punch the detail into those panels, and then you bring on your decorative edges and you start to create your different combinations. Watch that a couple of times, go along and do it, and pause the video as you do it, because it's super simple. It's just remembering that process. So Canvas Workspace will always have the plain circles to punch the pattern into. The decorative panels become the bits that cut it out, if you like. So it's been really thought through, and I think being able to do that gives you so many different options. So you could have the solid circle in one pattern, you could have the middle frame in another pattern, and you could have the large frame in another pattern. So if you want to really go to town, you can absolutely do that. And that is why we give you the files the way we do. And that's why I wanted to teach you how to do that in Canvas Workspace.